It's critical that the Jews must be white, theologically. Because once the Jews are white and they're at the door of the Bible, then anyone who reads this text must read it through the interpretation and the culture of those that are claimed to be Jews. So once the Jews are white, do you have a problem with the white Jesus? Why would you have a problem? It's a rewriting, it's a stealing of black history. Blatant. One of the biggest lies ever told on the face of the earth is that Jews are white.
I have chapter 3 now, verse 48.
First Maccabees 3 and verse 48.
Mm-hmm. Now this is Judah Maccabee. Go ahead.
And laid open the book of the law.
So when they got our records back, it says they laid open the book of the law.
Wherein...
Hey, put the picture up on the screen for me, the first one. Yep. Here's an example of the book of the law, the Bible. Read again.
And laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images.
So the heathen started to put their images in our book. Open that book right there. Yep. Look at that. That's supposed to be Jacob wrestling the angel. Are you kidding me? Look like two sodomites, two LGBT members. The hell is going on here? Exactly. There you go. You can make this stuff up.
All right, so first we're going to go to the Zondervan's, Bible dictionary, and you can see what it says right here. It says ready, the word ready, a word used to refer to a red or fair complexion, in contrast to the dark skin of the Hebrews. So you see what the guy was saying about the Hebrew skin color being dark, right? That's what this says. This is the Bible dictionary, the Zondervan Bible dictionary, and you can see what this says. Now let me give you an example of ruddy, okay? Because when you talk about a ruddy duck or a ruddy horse, this is what you see. So you see, this is what a ruddy horse. If you describe a horse as being ruddy, this is what the color is when you talk about a horse being ruddy, okay? You see, it's more brown. It's a brownish red complexion. Now, also you see, now I took this years ago, but you probably won't even be able to find these images no more. But when you see where it says Google result for ruddy people, right? You see the complexion that they have for people who are ruddy. You know what I'm saying? It's more of a brownish reddish tint, complexion. So that's what the word ruddy actually means. But so you see the dark skin of the Hebrews would actually even be darker in complexion than brown skin. Okay. All right. One more principle we need to lay down. Ham. Okay. The youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood. And this comes from the Zondervan Bible Dictionary too. And one of 8 persons to live through the flood, he became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes. So you see, it clearly tells you that the Negroes are not the descendants of Ham, right? But the Egyptians, right? So Egyptians are Hamites. Ethiopians, which are the sons of Cush, they're Hamites. And Libyans, and the Canaanites, right? So you see all these people are Hamites, okay? They descend from Ham. But the Zondervan Bible Dictionary says the Negroes do not descend from Ham.
Now, the Negroes are set apart because it said Ham, the progenitor of the dark races, but not the Negroes, not of the Negroes. So who are the Negroes? In the book of Acts 13 verse 1, an Israelite is called nigger. An Israelite is called nigger. The word Negro comes from the Latin word niger of Niger, which means black. In 1555, this word gained popularity among the Spaniard and Portuguese, and they used it to describe the black African Jews who were also known as Moreno. Yeah, the Portuguese and the Spaniards, they took this word from its Latin origin, and they began to call the black African Jew in Portugal and Spain negro. Yeah, and this word negro transformed into the English Negro, and Negroes. Yeah? And these African Jews in Spain and Portugal, they were also known as Moreno. And Moreno is another Spanish word which means black. Moreno is the Spanish and Portuguese and Jewish nickname for people with dark hair and zwartzie, black complexion. Now zwartzie means black. It is German, and zwart in Dutch has the same meaning, black. Yeah? So they use the word Moreno, yeah, as a nickname, an insult for dark people with dark complexion and dark hair. And this word Moreno probably comes from the Latin Maurinus, a derivative of classic Latin Maurus, Moor, which means black. See? Moor come from the Latin Maurus, which means black. So you have all these different names: Niger, Negro, Moreno, Moor. And they all mean the same. Black, 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 black. An interesting fact, Moreno is also a popular name in South Africa. Mainly among the Sesotho boys. And the name means king or chief and is usually given to boys of regal lineage.
When we talk about race, we're talking about that group of people that white people sometimes call niggers. I wonder how many of you actually know what that word means. You will by the end of the show. Now, if I were to tell you that blacks once had a great culture which exceeded the culture of whites, you'd probably find that pretty incredible. But we're talking about the ignored truths of history. Those of you who've been watching this show may perhaps recall that several weeks ago, we talked about the fact that most of the Jews alive in the world today may actually be descendants of Russian converts. Now, Jews like to consider themselves to be descendants of Israel. So the fact that Russia was once a Jewish nation for 500 years, in fact, and that most Jews who are alive today may be more closely descended from Attila the Hun than from King Solomon, these are facts which are just glaring facts, and it's incredible that such things could be ignored. And the question of how such things could be ignored has an answer, and the answer is collusion. All the parties involved have silently agreed, even perhaps without ever talking to each other, they've silently agreed to just not discuss this subject. In the case of the Russian Khazar Jews, it's embarrassing and frightening to Jews to consider the possibility that they may actually be descendants of converts and may have very little Israeli blood in them. In the case of the Russians, it's a horrendous embarrassment to them to admit that for 500 years, in the Middle Ages, Russia was a Jewish nation. So they just ignore it. It's collusion. Now, if I were to tell you that blacks, for as many centuries as whites have been superior, if you want, in the Western world, that for just as many centuries blacks were superior, you'd probably find that hard to believe. And you wonder how such a fact could be hidden. And the answer is, again, collusion. The whites wouldn't want to admit such a thing, because whites like to feel superior and like to think that their superiority is somehow permanent, decreed by God. As for blacks, if you look into the black civilizations that we're going to take a look at momentarily, you find something pretty interesting. You find that those civilizations actually arose as Jewish civilizations, later to become Islamic civilizations.
See here, what does it say? You see the woolly-haired woman, right? What does it say? Book The Family Tutor, Volume 2 from Oxford University says the Jews were originally a dark-skinned, woolly-haired people of a woolly-haired race of people, right? So you see it, right? What does it say? Look down here at the bottom of your screen where it says the Jews as we shall have occasion to see, were originally, undoubtedly, dark-skinned and woolly-haired race. Okay?
Joined by Rabbi Harry Rosenberg, who does a lot of very interesting work in the story of the lost tribes of Israel, and we are very happy to have him back in studio. Hello, and good to see you.
Wonderful to be back.
So we just had a very interesting interview before the commercial break with an anthropologist and a community leader of the Lemba community in Zimbabwe. You talk a lot about this. You do a lot of coursework. So what do you have to say first about the Lemba and what makes them unique as opposed to some of the other groups that are considered lost tribes?
Correct. Lemba are fascinatingly unique because we could trace them directly to the oldest Jewish exile community in the world from Yemen. And the Yemenite Jewish community, when they came back to Israel, they had customs that were preserved for 2,000 years uninterrupted. Even some of their pronunciation of Hebrew letters were unique as far as how the Ashkenazim and Sephardim pronounced their letters, but no one challenged them saying it's unauthentic. It was as authentic it can get. And so when you see the Lemba all the way down to the bottom of Africa, tracing their roots.
I want to find out how these people seem to have Jewish customs. Samuel Moeti is president of the Lemba Cultural Association.
Pleasure. So, I'll be honest, I came into this village and the first word I heard was shalom,
yes.
A Hebrew word.
Yes.
How is that possible? How is it that the Lemba are speaking Hebrew?
The Lembas are the original Hebrews, and they were scattered, as you know, and they crossed into Africa. So they were scattered all over. So in South Africa, in many parts of South Africa, you find the Lembas who are actually Hebrews.
Hebrew. So the Lembas claim to be descendants of ancient Israelites?
Not claim, they are.
They are?
They are. Not claim, they are.
They are?
They are.
Okay.
We are the original African Hebrew.
The Lemba is a group with a very strong cultural identity and practices unlike that of other groups around them.
They maintain traditions which are significantly different from the traditions respected by most of the tribes in Central and Southern Africa.
Tudor Parfitt is a historian who has devoted his life to studying Judaizing groups all over the world. He's associated with the School for African and Oriental Studies in London, but lives in southern France. He's lived with the Lemba and has written several books about them. He's found that the Lemba have many practices and traditions that are more Israelite than African.
We carried the beliefs and the practices from the past with us. And we never relinquished our practices even when we were in Africa.
Professor Magda Leroux of UNISA has also lived among the Lemba and has written a book about them. She specifically researched the Lemba's Jewish Israelite-like customs and traditions.
My main purpose was to investigate the oral traditions and to compare them with the Old Testament traditions and their customs. And it was fascinating to me to discover that their way of celebrating the new moon is even older than that of the Jewish people today. And it's interesting that the Lemba still have the pre-Talmudic way of celebrating the new moon. And that is traceable.
So, Magdal believes that the Lemba have many practices that point to an ancient Israelite origin.
That has been confirmed also through our practices. The fact that we don't partake of pork, the fact that we get circumcised at a very young age, and there would be rituals which would be held immediately after circumcision, which we continue to do now.
In 3 verse 10, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, Cush, my supplants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. And that day shalt thou not be ashamed of all thy doings, wherein thou hast transgressed against me. But then I will take away out of the midst of thee them that rejoice in thy pride, and thou shalt no more be haughty because of thy holy mountain. Pretty interesting. It says that the dispersed of Israel are beyond the rivers of Cush. I thought they was only in Europe and in Asia. Now let's take a closer look at this scripture. Beyond, Eber, a region across, on the opposite side. So let me get this straight. The Most High said that the dispersed of Israel are in the opposite side of the rivers of Cush. Wow. So what's the opposite side of East Africa? Hey, that would be West Africa. Get out of here. Who would have thought? Hey, I wonder if anybody else knew about these Hebrews being in West Africa. In the year 65 BC, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son, Titus, put an end to the Jewish state with great slaughter. During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa, fleeing the Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves. From Babylon to Timbuktu, by Rudolph R. Windsor. The 16th century historian and traveler, Leon Africanus, was a Hebrew-speaking Jewish convert to Islam, raised in a Jewish household by Jewish parents of Moroccan descent. Leon Africanus traveled extensively in Africa south of the Sahara, where he encountered innumerable black African Jewish communities. Let me say it again. Where he encountered innumerable black African Jewish communities. Leon later converted to Catholicism, but remained interested in Jewish communities where he encountered throughout his travels in West Africa. This is a quote from his book, The Description of Africa. Albeit, they say that upon the Nilus, or the Nile, do inhabit two great and populous nations. One of Jews toward the west, under a government of a mighty king. Leo Africanus, The Description of Africa, Volume 1, page 32. Ibn Kulahan, who lived in the 13th century, a respected authority on Berber history, testified that the black Jews of Western Sudan, with whom he personally interacted. Also, the famous Muslim geographer El-Drisi, born in Ceuta, Spain, in the 12th century, wrote extensively about Jewish Negroes in the Western Sudan. Black Jews were fully integrated and achieved preeminence in many West African kingdoms. For instance, the Jews were believed to have settled in great West African empires such as Songhai, Mali, Ghana, and Kanem-Borno empires. According to numerous accounts of contemporary visitors to the region, several rulers and administrators of the Songhai Empire were of Jewish origins, until Askia Muhammad came to power in 1492 and decreed that all Jews either convert to Islam or leave the region. Some accounts place some West African Jewish community in the Ondo Forest of Nigeria, south of Timbuktu. This community maintained a Torah scroll as late as in the 1930s, written in Aramaic, that had been burnt into a parchment with a hot iron instead of ink, so it could not be changed. See, going Rafika, the quest of the lost 10 tribes of Israel to the ends of the earth.
Zephaniah or Zephaniah, a Negro Israelite, a son of Cush. Zephaniah means YAHUAH hides. Now, Zephaniah's father was named Cushi, and Cushi as an adjective that means black. In both Hebrew, it means black, and in Greek, it means black. Now, Cushi is an affectionate term for a Negro of Ethiopian origin, derived from the biblical land of Cush. And it is an area that was alongside the Niger River. And if you actually look at ancient maps in 1736 and ancient maps in 1747 of Africa, you'll find a country called Negroland and the Kingdom of Judah. This is of utmost importance for us to understand how YAHUAH is gathering the 12 tribes that are scattered abroad. Because what actually happened is in this Gulf of Guinea in Western Africa, European slave ship holders, they were Ashkenazi slavers. They were of European origin. They were Western Mongols that had infiltrated Britain and mainly Portugal. They were the Ashkenazi slavers. They were wealthy merchant slavers that went down to the coast of Guinea. They employed Mohammedan trappers, Islamics, to go into the kingdom of Judah and Negro land and take the royal house of Judah captive in slave ships, as it's recorded in the book of Deuteronomy, and bring them over to America, and they became known today as what? African Americans. If you were to look at an African map today, the kingdom of Judah right on the Gulf of Guinea appears today in the present day Republic of Benin and the nation of Togo. So if you look on a map today at the nation of Togo and the present Republic of Benin, that is where the kingdom of Judah and Negro land was.
So the blacks that ended up in America today who call themselves American don't even realize that they were not originally American, they are originally African. So it would be proper to call them African Americans. African Americans have a true heritage with the Elohim of Israel. They indeed are the Hebrew Israelites of ancient times. How do we know that? How can I prove that? Very easy. From the very same scriptures I hold in my hand, the Bible. If we look at Hosea chapter 11 verse 11, it says that they will tremble out of Mitzrayim. Now this is out of the AFNHSS Bible I hold in my hand. What does this Mitzrayim word mean? It means people of black skin. Mitzrayim is a Hebrew word used for Egypt, which means black face. It doesn't mean a white face, it doesn't mean an Asian looking face like mine, but it does mean a black face. However, we know that the common ancestors of many nations were the black people, Africans. And Mitzrayim, we know Mitzrayim is here. If we look at Egypt here, we know that it is directly not only west but south of Israel, southwest. We have Libya southwest, Algeria west. We have Mauritania, so we have Nigeria, we have Mali, we have Sudan. We have all these nations that are sitting west of Israel, and then the next nation that is west of Israel here is Spain. Spain, you know, that had a large number of Sephardic Jews. So they were also part of the Israelites. And the other parts of western lands, Brazil. Brazil has a large number of Hebrew Israelites. We have America. America has a large number, and even Canada has Hebrew Israelites. But these Canada and United States of America are the further western lands. Immediate west to Israel is Africa. So they were driven out, and we know from history that they ended up in African lands. And I would suggest to you very strongly that the Hebrew Israelites were black. The customs today of the African nations, you will find, was very particularly linked to Hebrew Israelite customs. Now, this may come as a shock to many of you. This may come as a shock to many of you because you've been taught that, you know, the children of Israel are in England and they are in Belgium and in Denmark, and they are the white folks or the Europeans. No, they are not. In fact, if you find the practices, one of the practices that the Hebrew Israelite customs has was a polygamy. That was a practice that you find predominantly in the East, Pakistan, India, Iran, and also in the West, meaning Algeria, Sudan, Nigeria. These practices still continue over there. Even though they have gone through many religions over here, Islam rules dominantly in many of these parts, and there's Christianity, but these people have never given up their culture. The Nigerians, for instance, Christians, don't stop having two wives. They still have two wives, many of the people. Even though the Western Europeans reject the idea of having two wives and they want monogamous single relationships, you find that the Western people, including the American people, are stuck in their monogamous past, which was from the Romans and from the Greeks. And the past, not only from the Romans and the Greeks, that one attribute shows us that it was also a common habit of the Grecians to have a wife and have a boyfriend. They were into homosexuality as well. So we find the same situation in England, in America. Today homosexuality is given the thumbs up. People are happy with homosexuality. They're not happy with polygamy. Why? Because these people were never part of the Hebrew Israelites. They kept their customs, and they still sneer at the customs of Hebrew Israelites. Hebrew Israelites, on the other hand, they don't have a problem with single marriages or dual marriages. Why? Because they were Hebrew Israelites. These are part of the laws of the Bible. When a brother dies, then the living brother has to take on the widow to give her sons. Where's the widow going to go? If the widow doesn't get taken over by the son as a wife, as a second wife, where is she going to go? There was no social security system. There was no support system for them. And the divorcee, where were the divorcees going to go? Today the divorcees in the West can get social security. The widows can get social security. Nevertheless, these customs that still inhabit these areas of the east and the west of Israel, you must understand that they tell us something about these people's culture and ancient lands. For instance, if you go to Ghana today, down here, you will find that the Ghanaians have a tribe called the Ashanti. The Ashanti tribe are from an area they identify in Israel called Ashan. Ashan is a Hebrew word that means smoke, and it relates to the burning. Why? Because when the Jerusalem was burning, these people left Israel and they ended up in these African regions. These Ashanti people, they identify their Almighty Creator as someone called Yeme, or they have the word spelled is N-N-Y-E-M-E, O-N-Y-E-M-E, on Yeme, but they don't pronounce the O and the N. So the Yeme, the word M, the letter M, is interchangeable in the ancient Ashanti language with W. There would be Yahweh. Yahweh is a term for YAHUAH, which many people pronounce like myself, Yahweh. Some of you pronounce as YAHUAH. However, that tells us something about the Ashanti people in Africa. Ashanti people are Hebrew people. They still have the custom of the woman separating after for the menstruation period, 7 days. They still have the custom of circumcising their children. But show me these customs in the Americans. Show me these customs in the British people. You won't find them. They don't exist.
The Igbos, like the Hebrews in the Bible, have a priestly clan. This priestly clan, we have a priestly clan that in Igbo, if you come to any Igbo village, if you ask any Igbo person you come across, we have a priestly clan that count our years, that count our calendar, that keep our calendar. They offer sacrifices and prayers and oblations and everything to God. We had this priestly clan. Like I mentioned, our tradition now has been mingled with idol worship. So most of these things are being done now to idols. But however, if we go to the book of YAHUAH, and I mentioned he is an Igbo man that was sold into slavery. He was 11 years old. He gave a chronicle in this book of our communities before idols or before slavery came in. He said, though we had no places of public worship, we had priests and magicians or wise men. I do not remember whether they have different offices or whether they are united in the same persons, but they were held in great reverence by the people. They calculated our time and foretold events. As their name imported, for we call them Afọwaka, which signifies calculators or yearly men, our year being called Afọ. They wore their beards, and when they died, they were succeeded by their sons. Now, he said here that this priestly clan is hereditary. When they die, they are succeeded by their son. It's hereditary, and they wore their beard. If you go and look at Leviticus chapter 21, the priests, the children of Levi, the sons of Aaron, were not allowed to shave their beards. In Leviticus chapter 21, they were not allowed to shave their beards. So they wore their beards. Now, this priestly clan in Igbo land existed. And if you read the book of YAHUAH, they only bury themselves. They don't touch the corpse of other people. They are only buried by themselves. Go and read Deuteronomy chapter 14. You will see this thing. It was given as a law by the Most High to the Levites. They should leave their beards to grow. They shouldn't cut it. And they should not be defiled by the dead of other people except their kinsmen. We practice this in Igbo land, and the Most High has preserved one of us, Mr. YAHUAH, to chronicle this thing in our day, to remind our people to come back to him. So this proof number 10 is actually a very popular one. I call it the curses of Deuteronomy 28. The Igbos are the only tribe that meet these curses of Deuteronomy 28. Why is this important? You see, I've actually seen a number of videos where some Negroes in Americas talk about their Hebrew origin. Most of them talk about their being Israelites. I've seen a number of presentations from people, the Negroes in the Americas, how they are Israelites from their origin. That is because they are Igbos. The majority of them, of course, are Igbos. And I'll be showing that here because the Igbo people in southeastern Nigeria actually meet these curses in Deuteronomy chapter 28. If you're not familiar with the curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28 or even the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28, please just stop now and go and read it. It's a very long chapter. I think it got up to verse 68 or 68. In that chapter, Moses was telling the Hebrews the blessings that will come to them if they follow the laws, the judgments, the commandments, the statutes, and the feast of the Most High. And then later on, he now gave them the curses that will come to them if they don't follow it. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68. And it says that, let's read it here from the Bible. It says, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I speak unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you." This is the Bible prophecy that talks about transatlantic slavery. The other Bible prophecy that talks about is Ezekiel chapter 38. But in this Bible prophecy, the curse of Deuteronomy 28 is, if you do not keep the laws and commandments of the Most High, the Lord shall bring you into Egypt again with ships. And again, we are not talking about the geographical Egypt, because the geographical Egypt, from the Jerusalem to the geographical Egypt, you don't need to go by ship. There's a land bridge, about 300-mile land bridge, that is called the Sinai Peninsula. So you can just walk down there. So it's talking about the transatlantic slavery.
And today we're going to be going over the Black Jews of Saint Tomé. Some of you may not or may have never heard of the Black Jews of Saint Tomé, also known as Saint Thomas. All right, that's on the west coast of Africa. Now some of you may or may not understand that the Portuguese brought those Black Jews from West Africa and banished them to the small island on the west coast of Africa named Saint Thomas or Saint Tomé. Those Jews that were there, those black slaves that were there, eventually many of them came to the Americas, all right, and are known as during the transatlantic slave trade of 1619. But the slave trade actually started in 1441 with the Spanish Inquisition and the banishment of the Jews, the Black Jews from Saint Tomé. First book right here is called The Critical Review or Annals of Literature. The Critical Review or Annals of Literature. Now I want to pull up this book real quick. So here's the first page I want to go to. It says Discovery of the Gold Coast. All right, served indeed yet more to enlarge the sphere of the navigation of the Portuguese. Keep that in mind, that their slave trade, but it forced them also to extend themselves on the coast and to settle colonies in Congo, Angola, and other places, which they had till then neglected. Prince Henry colonies were enlarged by his successors. King John II in 1492 expelled all the Jews to the island of St. Thomas. That island of St. Thomas is Saint Tomé, okay? That island of St. Thomas is Saint Tomé. Notice it said he expelled all the Jews, which had been discovered in 1471, and to the other Portuguese settlements on the continent of Africa. And from these banished Jews, the Black Portuguese, as they are called. You see that? Do you see that? It says the Black Portuguese, as they are called. But let's go inside here. All right, so that's the top part we just read, right? So it said these Negroes, remember these Negroes are those banished Jews, banished to St. Thomas, all right? So, or Saint Tomé. It said these Negroes were purchased in Guinea, Congo, and Mani-Congo, and the colonies had plantations furnished with from 150 to 3,000 Negro slaves. You're not listening. From Guinea, Congo, and Mana-Congo, and the colonies had plantations furnished with from 150 to 3,000 Negro slaves. This is what you saw in St. Thomas, all right? In the beginning of the 16th century, the Spaniards and Portuguese began to transport Negroes for similar labors to the West Indies and Brazils, by which the Negroes trade was rapidly increased. Are you seeing this? Those black Jews that were banished to St. Thomas eventually became the blacks that were known as Negroes that came to this side of the world. This is nothing to play with. This is nothing to play with. And guess what? The Bible actually backs that up. This is the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28. Let's look at verse 15. It says, "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee." So the Lord told Moses to tell the children of Israel, if they broke God's commandments, that curses will come upon them and overtake them. Those curses is what you see happening to us till this very day. Now we're going to skip down to verse 68. "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships." How did black people get to America? How did the blacks get to the America, to the Caribbean islands, to Brazil, so on and so forth? Now look at that. Now when you look at this, you see Sierra Leone, you see all these various different countries. Guess what? St. Thomas is one of those countries, one of those little islands that they came from. And then look, when we got here, this is what they did for us. They put us on the bottom of these ships. Look at that. Look at that. We ain't got time to play around. We telling you the hardcore facts, brothers and sisters. We was put on slave ships and brought to the Americas. But look at that. Inside of the ship, look at our forefathers, our ancestors inside those ships. So this is not a game. This is the truth. I know it hurts a lot of our people, but we got to bring out the truth of the Bible. And the Bible says that our forefathers went into slavery on ships for being disobedient to God's word. That's why we went on those slave ships. Let's go back to Deuteronomy real quick, chapter 28. And let's look at verse 68. It says, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you." That's what happened to the Jews that were in St. Thomas or St. Thomé. They were taken against their will from their mothers and fathers, brought to a land that they knew not, and they were sold as bondmen and bondwomen, and nobody was able to buy them. Buy them how? Meaning buy them back out of that captivity. None of your ancestors were able to come to America and redeem you with money and bring you back to St. Thomé, back to Senegal, back to Nigeria, back to Mali, back to Congo, or any of those various different places.
Abraham has never been white. He came from Ur of the Chaldees, which is a city which was built by Nimrod. And Nimrod is the son of Cush. Cush is a black man.
Cush is a black man.
Of course. Then how can Abraham, which is a Shona word actually, be a white man?